Hello and welcome to My Finance Teacher. Today I want to do something new. I want to have a look at the traditional stock market. We haven't done this on this channel yet, and this is the S&P 500 weekly chart in front of you, going back to the beginning of 2016, so that's more than 2.5 years of data in front of us. And I want to apply the cycles analysis to this chart. Well, late in 2015 we had a significant decline in the S&P 500, so that's where I want to start at the beginning of 2016, applying these cycles. So I see one cycle that started in early February 2016 and finished in late June 2016. That gives us 20-week cycle, and during the declining phase of that cycle, which lasted only 4 or 5 weeks, the price dipped slightly below the 50-week moving average. This blue line is the 50-week moving average. The decline in the RSI was not that significant. We dipped just a little bit below the neutral level on the 7-week RSI. This is the 7-week RSI. The next cycle was the shortest that we've seen so far in this period, lasting only 18 weeks. So these first two cycles, I'm pretty certain about these, although they seem to be a little too short. The next two is what I'm a little bit uncertain about. One way to count this period from October 2016 to August 2017 is to have two cycles embedded within this period, one lasting for 23 weeks, another lasting for 19 weeks. However, the price declines within these cycles were not that significant, so an alternative count would give us one cycle for all of that period, lasting for about 42 weeks. Although RSI did reach deeply overbought on the 7-week RSI in the beginning of 2017 and declined all the way down to neutral, although neutral doesn't seem to be that deep compared to where RSI was before. That is a significant decline. So it's probably more likely that the correct count for this period is having two relatively short cycles. After that, of course, we saw a cycle that lasted for about 24 weeks and finished with this significant decline in the S&P in early this year, which brought S&P back close to the 50-week moving average. So from time to time we see price come back to 50-week moving average when it's stretched a little bit too far above that average. And the most interesting is the period since February this year. Have we already seen a relatively short cycle that lasted for 20 weeks? And are we in a new cycle since the middle of this year, since late June? Or are we in a cycle that is still lasting since February this year? Still going on since February this year? Well, one alternative is to place one cycle within this period since the beginning of this year that lasted from early February to late June. That would give us a 20-week cycle, a relatively short one again, but it's a possibility. And we saw a 3-week decline at the end of that cycle. Although the decline was not that severe, and the 7-week RSI didn't move down that much. Alternatively, we might still be in the intermediate cycle that is going on since February this year. That would give us a 30-week cycle, which is quite possible, but it's getting stretched a little bit already. And in that case, as cycle comes to an end, a declining phase of this intermediate cycle should get going in earnest, and in that case we would see a considerable decline in the S&P 500 over the next several weeks. Well, bringing us, say, close to, say, 2760 or something like that on the S&P 500. That would be a decline from the high of about 2916 over the next several weeks. So what are the factors that point to this possible decline over the next several weeks? Well, one of the factors is that Last week and a couple of weeks before that, we saw the 7-week RSI in overbought territory, and it started to decline. So that might indicate that prices are a little bit stretched too far above the 50-week moving average, and it's time to go for mean reversion, going down towards this 50-week moving average. Another possible factor is the length of this cycle. It's already getting stretched a little bit too long, and it's time to finish this cycle with a low. So again, going into the declining phase of this cycle. And there's another factor. Yesterday on Friday, the jobs report came out, and the amount of jobs created was actually a little bit higher than the amount of jobs that was expected to be created. So that seems to be a relatively positive news, although with this news the stock market didn't react that well to that news, and we still see a pretty big red candle for that week. So that just might indicate that we are going into a declining phase in this cycle. Besides, if you look at the daily chart, Friday itself doesn't show much of a green candle. There was a shot up in the early parts of the day, however that reversed back down again, possibly indicating that despite the good news on the jobs report, it is time to go down for the stock markets. So returning back to the weekly chart, if we are still in this cycle that is so far going on for 30 weeks, that might last for, well, say 40 weeks or slightly more than that. So over the next several weeks, over the next maybe a couple of months, we might see S&P 500 come back down towards the 50-week moving average. On the other hand, if I see S&P 500 above, say 2900, that would mean that we are probably in a shorter cycle that lasted at the end of June this year, and what we might see price-wise is a continuation of the stock prices going slightly higher. I don't see any explosive moves near the end of the cycle, and we might see a declining phase of this cycle somewhere near the end of this year. That would coincide nicely with the tax loss selling. So which of these two alternatives I think is more likely? Well, to be honest, I'm not really sure. I think there is 55 to 60% chance, so I think it's slightly more likely that over the next several weeks S&P 500 is going to decline towards the 50-week moving average. Whereas the alternative, with the decline coming into the tax loss selling, is probably 40 to 45 chance likelihood. So I'm on the edge about it, and I'd be interested to know your opinion. So comments under the video are always welcome. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, and have a nice weekend.